This week, we're talking trade. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update on Brownfield. I'm your host, Meghan Grebner. With this week is Mississippi State University's Josh Maples. Welcome back, Josh.
Hey, Megan, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. We're just wrapping up our coverage from Cattlemen's down in San Antonio, Texas. So if I don't look like I'm in my studio, I'm trying to make my way back home. You're also on the road today, so we are a match made in livestock market heaven.
That's right. We just stopped wherever we were so we could talk about cattle markets this week and hog markets.
We are going to talk cattle and hog markets. We're also going to talk a lot about trade, which has been a big topic this week in San Antonio. But first, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Sure. So yeah, live steer prices ended the week down just under $3 from last week, 207, $2.07 per pound, or 207.11 per hundredweight for the 5 market average. February live cattle prices down 367 compared to a week ago, so down pretty significantly. Feeder cattle prices down nearly $10 on the week to 265.18. We saw choice box beef was at 322 at the end of the week. That was down about $5 in a bit of a retreat there in the box beef cutout value. Cash hogs are up $1.50 to 83.66 per hundred. February lean hog futures were up about $3 per hundred to 87.25 on the week. Pork cutout values were up $1.49 from a week ago to $95.07 per hundredweight this week.
Josh, on the cattle side of things, obviously we've been on this upward trajectory for several weeks. Are you surprised to see it pull back and maybe take a little bit of a breath this week?
I'm not. I mean, just given this is one of those weeks where it just seems like there was some instability. I mean, certainly on the trade front, a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty. And as you know, Megan, markets don't like uncertainty. It's not that it changes the overall fundamentals of where we are with supply and demand. But it's not surprising to see a hiccup here. So I think that's kind of what I'm attributing this to. Not that we're all of a sudden on some big down trend or anything like that.
And let's talk a little bit about that uncertainty after we look into those monthly and annual trade data information, because I think that tariff conversation is something that's kind of on everybody's minds. Let's talk a little bit weekly slaughter. How are things looking as you look on both the cattle and hog side?
Yeah, so cattle slaughter was down about 4% on the week, 576,000 head. This was down about 23,000 head from last week and down about 40,000 head from the same week a year ago. Hog slaughter was up 2.413 million head. This is up about 122,000 head from last week, but down about 210,000 head compared to where we were a year ago.
It's always interesting to see slaughter numbers, especially on the cattle side of things, knowing that inventory is not getting any bigger.
Yeah, for sure. And I know y'all talked about the inventory numbers last week. I think that's going to be a discussion we're going to have throughout this year, Megan. I mean, I really do. We're going to have these tighter supplies. We're seeing that. And it's going to be really interesting to watch these slaughter numbers over the first 6 months of this year. I mean, I can say it for the whole year, but I'm saying the first 6 months of the year because that's really what I'm interested in right now.
Okay, so let's dig into monthly and annual trade data. Those were out this week. Let's start on the cattle and beef side of things. And I think, do you want to start with imports or do you want to finish there? Because that number I think is one that always stands out.
Either one, Megan. I'm going to start with exports. How about that? And then we'll jump to imports after that. So beef exports on the year down about 1%, 3 billion pounds, still a lot of exports, down about 1% compared to 2023. I always like to look at where the exports are going. I think that's fascinating to look at the changes you see with each country. So exports to Canada, China, and South Korea, big export markets for all of us for beef, were each down 6% compared to 2023. Really, what saved us a bit, or I shouldn't say saved us a bit, what kept that number from being lower is we saw big increases to Japan. So Japan's our biggest export market. And we saw exports to Japan increase by 8% in 2024. So that was our largest export market by volume. So about 21% of our total exports went to Japan last year. 21% also went to South Korea, just a touch lower, but still 21%. China was third. 16% of exports went to China, which, Meghan, you and I have talked about this before. To think back 3 or 4 or 5 years ago to say that 16% of our beef exports would be going to China is significant from when it was at zero, not super long ago. So China third. Mexico was fourth this year. 11% of our total beef exports went to Mexico in 2024. We look at the monthly data. I'll touch on that real quick, and then pass it back to you. We can kick off the import discussion. Exports were 3% higher in December. So the latest data that came out finished out the year. But if you look at the monthly data, we did see a 3% bump in increase in December compared to December of 2023.
All right, so let's talk the import side of things. Obviously, with cattle inventory numbers that continue to shrink and have continued to shrink over the last couple of years, to meet our demand, we've had to import more beef. When you look at the import data for the year, 24%, or an increase of 24%. Talk to me a little bit about your takeaway from that, and what are some of the things you're watching as you look ahead to 2025 and probably into 2026?
Yeah, I think you touched on it, Meghan. We've got tighter supplies. We've got tighter beef supplies, tighter cattle supplies. We've already set the stage to have tighter supplies in 2025. We did end up producing more than we initially expected to produce in 2024, but still, we're in this situation where we've got lower cattle numbers. The one that jumps out to me and to everybody is the one you mentioned, the 24% increase, 4.6 billion pounds of beef imported in 2024. Australia was the biggest source there, which is not surprising, but about 24% of the total. So 24% of that 4.6 billion pounds came from Australia. Canada was second. 22% of our beef imports came from Canada. Brazil was third at 15%. Mexico was fourth on beef imports this year at 13%. Out of all of those countries I just mentioned, Mexico was the only one, and really the only one out of our top import partners that we saw a decline in. Every other country we saw an increase in, driven by those stronger prices that we have here in the U.S. And a really strong dollar compared to a lot of currencies that were other currencies as well. So Mexico was the only one that was lower. If you look at just the December number, I'll touch on that real quick. That gets overshadowed by the annual number, but imports during December were 30% above December of 2023.
When we talk about what we're importing, Josh, do you think it is of note the type of beef that we're importing and why we're looking to other countries?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the majority of what we're importing is going into our lean trim. I mean, it is lean trim that's going into ground beef. If you look at our ground beef values and what they've been, we don't have nearly enough cull cows to satisfy the lean trim that we need here in the U.S. that we mix with the fatty trimmings from our fat steers and heifers. So when you think about the cattle or the beef that we're importing from Australia in particular, it's a lot of lean beef that is going into ground beef, going into hamburger to meet that demand. And Meghan, we talked before about this, that a lot of that really does add value to U.S. cattle production. I don't, there's certainly some of it that you could view as competes with U.S. produced beef, but there's also, when you think about lean trims like that, that mixed with the beef that we produce here can actually add value to that total. So it's not all gloomy, I guess I should say. It's a mix. It's a pretty complicated mix.
All right, let's talk pork. A little bit different of a story for 2024.
Different story, Megan. Before we leave imports real quick, we can talk about Mexico cattle real quick.
Yes,
and then
because
then we'll jump to pork. I'm sorry, I forgot. I almost forgot as we were rolling through this. So cattle imports from Mexico were down 100% in December 2024. As you know, the ban because of screwworm, which just got lifted this week. But so that cattle imports from Mexico down 64% in December 2024 compared to December 23 because of that big drop from Mexico. So we've talked about it that, hey, we're going to see this play out in the data. We're finally seeing this play out in the data and seeing that significantly fewer cattle came into the country in December. And I think we are seeing that in some of our on feed data as well.
And it sounds like I talked to Dr. Simmons this week that the first load of cattle from Mexico came in on Thursday, and it's about 500 head at a time. So it's going to take us a while to ramp back up to the levels that we were previously.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing as well. It's not like it's not like we've just automatically turned it back on to where it was in October. There's new protocols, new scrutiny. It's going to be a while before we're back to the levels or anything that we saw back before the screwworm case.
All right. All right. So let's talk hogs and pork for 2024. Again, a significantly different story than what we're talking about for cattle and beef.
Yeah, for sure. So you look at pork exports, exports up 4% in 2024 compared to 2023. Mexico was our biggest destination there. 37% of total pork exports went to Mexico in 2024. Japan was second. Japan was at 15%. South Korea was third at 9%. Only 7% of exports went to Canada. Pork exports went to Canada in 2024. On the import side, definitely a different story. So pork imports were flat compared to 2023. Basically the same amount in 2024 as we saw in 2023. Canada, by far our largest source there, 62% of total imports came from Canada last year. And then Mexico was second at 8%. And then 7% of our pork imports came from Denmark.
All right. So let's talk tariffs. It was a busy Saturday. We had the announcement that USDA was lifting the ban on imports of live cattle from Mexico. We also had the announcement that tariffs went into place by Monday. Those have been paused for both, and by the end of the day, Monday, been paused for both Canada and Mexico. Obviously, that helps. But how much does that uncertainty and volatility come into what we're doing as a global supplier and a competitor in the global markets?
Yeah, I mean, easy week for a cattle analyst or any kind of analyst, right? I think on the cattle side, you have the first big inventory update in a year. You have the threat of tariffs followed up with the no threat of tariffs for now, and then followed up with we're resuming trade with one of our biggest import sources. And all this happened in what, 5, 6, 7 days? It was but you're right, Megan. It's the uncertainty right now. I think one of the things we're most certain about is the supply situation. And so I think that's going to be the thing that keeps some strength. That's the baseline here that is supporting cattle markets in particular. But it's this uncertainty that makes it really difficult for traders trying to figure out where this thing is going, at least in the short term. And the tariff discussion, even though we're at kind of this temporary stay or whatever you call it, it's not over. We're going to continue to have these discussions, and even whenever you start talking about retaliatory tariffs, it's still not going to be clear exactly what that is. And so I think that is and will be one of the big concerns moving forward is what happens. And I think that's anybody's guess right now.
I feel like there's going to be plenty for us to talk about in the first several months of this year as we're watching the new administration unfold and get to work.
For sure. There's going to be so many moving parts. I mean, it's not just how it affects beef and pork exports and imports. It's how it affects grain prices via imports and exports. I mean, there's so many moving parts here. We're going to have lots to talk about anytime that we get together to do one of these calls.
Well, Josh, it's great to see you. Thank you for stopping your day so we could get this done today.
Of course, Megan. Have safe travels back.
You too. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks.
So our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning. Go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments as well. For more market updates twice daily, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.